Darlie Routier Fact and Fiction, written for us years ago by our friend Mary Moody, with help from other supporters. I went through the introduction, the who's who, the Routier statements, the arrest warrant, author Barbara Davis, and the myths. Now I'm at Blood on Devin's shirt. You can see my playlist on my YouTube channel that has all these in order. I'm going to go through this to be sure this website stays with us as long as we possibly can have it. Myth 4. Darlie carried wet towels to Devin as Darin performed CPR. That is how she got Devin's blood on her t-shirt. Invariably, the first response to this is, why would she put wet towels on knife wounds? Darlie and supporters say it was because she wasn't thinking straight. She was in a panic. However, she had enough presence of mind to immediately apply pressure to her own wound with dry towels. The evidence detailed below proves that Darlie was not taking towels, wet or otherwise, to her dying sons. Shattered glass. First, let's consider the broken wine glass and Darlie's bare feet. She testified that as she stood up from the couch, the intruder was going into the kitchen and she heard a glass breaking. She walked behind. Initially, she said chased the intruder into the kitchen and backtracked to turn on the lights. They proceeded through the kitchen again to the utility room, where she picked up the knife, then back through the kitchen again, placing the knife on the counter. Then over to Darin, near the family room entrance. At this point, she finally screamed for Darin. Darlie claims she then went to the kitchen drawer for towels, wet them in the sink, and took them over to her injured boys. Mulder. How many trips to and from the sink did Darlie make? Darin. Probably 6 or 7. Direct testimony. Upon hearing Darlie's first story to police and seeing a shattered wine glass on the kitchen floor, much of it in a direct path from the sink to the family room, as can be seen in the above photo. The sink will be over this way. Cron dispatched an officer to the hospital to check on Darlie. She didn't have a single cut on her feet. What was the purpose, Davis? What was the purpose of your actually picking up some glass, Cron? To see how sharp it was and see if it was at all consistent with being the same type. I wanted to determine if the complainant in this case had cuts on the soles of her feet. It was sharp. I made a mistake and applied too much pressure and cut myself. No diluted blood. There was no testimony whatsoever to support diluted blood on the kitchen floor, towels, throw rugs, carpet, or Darlie's t-shirt. Blood diluted by water could have been readily apparent to investigators as well as the forensic analysts. Darlie's defense didn't even inquire about diluted blood on those items when they cross-examined Catherine Long, Judith Floyd, and Carolyn Van Winkle. Why the defense did not is rather obvious. They knew the answer would be no. The only diluted blood was in the kitchen and on the faucet handle. This blood type is Darlie's. With the fainter type, it could be either Devin, or Damon's. Davis to Charles Lynch. Davis, when you looked at the kitchen sink, what was its appearance? Lynch, it was unusual. There were some stains that appeared to be watered down, that had run into the stainless steel areas that were positive for blood. The blood stains on the front of the cabinet were such that when blood was being shed, it would also need to be shed into the sinks, which were now clean. So it was my opinion that the sinks have probably been cleaned with blood. The faucet and handles appeared to be clean, but were also reactive to the presence of blood. The chemicals we use, if blood is present, it will pop up a green color, kind of a blue-green. If the blood is fresh, it will react very quickly and very bright blue-green. If blood is old, you'll get a kind of dull light green color. Davis, what kind of reaction did you get for the samples inside the sinks? Lynch, those were quickly and darkly reactive. In addition, a careful reading of Lynch's testimony reveals forensic evidence under the sink that contradicts Darlie's many stories. Davis, did you have an opportunity to look at the cabinet under the sink? Lynch, yes, sir. Davis, was the blood on the outside of the cabinet consistent with blood having been deposited when the doors were closed? Yes. Davis, was there also blood on the inside of the cabinet, that was consistent with having been dropped while the doors to the cabinet were actually open? Lynch, yes. Do you remember what was inside the cabinet? Lynch, as I recall, it was the usual under-sink kitchen cleaning materials, cleanser, and stuff. Catherine Long described the blood on the left cabinet handle as a transfer stain. Someone with a bloody hand opened that cabinet door for some reason. Low velocity blood. As explained in Myth 8, which will be coming up, Darlie's blood drops in the kitchen were consistent with someone running or even moving quickly through the area. They were dropped at approximately a 90-degree angle, almost straight up and down. Had she been running wet towels to her sons, her blood drops would have been elongated and diluted with water. The faucet. Barry Dickey was an audio specialist who testified for the prosecution. He enhanced the sounds on the tape of the 911 call. Greg Davis. Let me ask you, too. During that portion of the tape, where we have female caller going into the kitchen and saying, "Oh my God, what do we do? Oh my God," while she's in the very reflective, uncarpeted portion of the house, sir, do you hear any sound on that tape you would interpret to be running water? Dickey, no, it would have been listed. I detected no sound like that. What Mary Dickey did hear, and hear very clearly, was the sound of the Routier's dog, Domain, barking on the second floor of the house. One must ask how a dog's bark from that distance can be picked up on a 911 call. But running water with a couple of feet from the telephone was not. On cross-exam, Mosty asked about the big screen television in the family room. Mosty, Mr. Dickey, why aren't you able to tell me what is being said on the TV? Dickey, it obviously wasn't close enough to the proximity of the telephone. Mosty, so you heard the dog but not the TV? Dickey, that's right. This was smoke and mirrors on Mosty's part. Several officers acknowledged the TV being on, but they could not hear it. Obviously, the sound had been muted or turned down very low. Huff, was the TV on or off? Waddell, it was on. You didn't hear anything on the TV, you just saw the screen? Waddell, right. Incidentally, while it is true that Darlie didn't know CPR, Darin had taken courses in CPR first aid over the last 7 years. He knew and admitted on stand that wet towels weren't a good idea. So why didn't he tell Darlie even once during the supposedly 6 or 7 trips that he made over to the boys to stop wetting the towels? After all, he didn't hesitate to give her other first aid advice. Davis. Darlie didn't move Damon, is that correct? Darin. No, I told her not to. Darin's conflicting testimony. In the August 26, 1996 bond hearing, Darin knew only that the kitchen sink had been removed from the house. How many times have you met with the Rowlett Police Department about this case? Darin, 4 or 5 times. Okay, when was the first time you told them that your wife went over to that kitchen sink? Darin, probably the second or third time. Davis, isn't it the truth that you never mentioned that to the police, have you? Darin, well, I remember seeing it. Davis, okay, but you never tell the police, did you? Darin, I don't recall. Darin's trial testimony 5 months later was quite different. By that time, he was aware of the DNA evidence that was on Darlie's shirt, and he changed his story to conform to the physical evidence. Davis, as I understand your testimony with Mr. Moeller, you testified that when you were with Devin, that your wife got some towels, brought them over to you, while you were actually blowing into his mouth. Is that right? Darin, yes, sir. Davis, now, Mr. Routier, that is the first time you've told that story to anyone, isn't it? Darin, well, I guess so. Davis, sir, you never did. In your testimony of September the 12th, you ever mentioned your wife coming over there and doing anything with Devin, did you? Darin, I wasn't asked. Davis, sir, I asked you a lot of times, what was your wife doing? Do you remember that? Darin, a lot of things I don't remember. During cross-examination, Darlie said, I don't remember, or I don't know, 72 times. Darin was a close second with 67. Note, one particular supporter website states, much emphasis was placed on bare footprints which showed a path from the family room to the kitchen and back again. This statement is incorrect. There are only 2 of Darlie's bloody footprints, and both were leading away from the sink toward the family room. None led toward that sink. Conclusion. Darlie inflicted her own wounds at the kitchen sink. She then attempted to wash away the blood, because it conflicted with her story of being attacked while sleeping on the couch. This is supported by 1, the washed out blood in the sink, 2, the large amount of her blood standing on the inside and outside of the cabinet and the throw rug underneath, and 3, the lack of any appreciable blood on the couch where her head would have been resting. In their June 8 statements, neither Darlie nor Darin mentioned her going to the sink or wetting towels, or bringing them to Devin. The wet towel story was born when Darin and Darlie realized that the police had taken the kitchen sink as evidence, and that the boy's spatter cast-off blood had been found on the shoulder areas of her nightshirt.